It's the Worldwide Sports Radio Network.
What's going on, everybody? Thanks for joining for another edition of Falco's Facts. I got two very special guests. I got James Scott. James, how's it going?
I'm good, man. How are you?
And then we got a familiar face, Charlie Baldy. Charlie, what's up, Chuck?
Not much going on now.
Let's talk some football. We got a big weekend coming up. We got NFL wildcard weekend. So the first team I want to talk about is the Bills and the Colts game. The Bills have been red hot to end the season. Josh Allen looks like a top 3 MVP candidate. And the Colts are that sleeper team that nobody's really talking about. But with that being said, is Josh Allen and this Buffalo Bills team ready to make a Super Bowl run? James, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I think they're a year away. I think this year has been a great year. We've seen Josh Allen really emerge as a good quarterback. Obviously, last year as well, didn't go so well. I do think they'll beat Colts. I think they get through the wild card round. But I don't think this is their year for the Super Bowl. I think this is certainly a year to build on. And then next year, I give them a good shout.
I would say definitely. I think the Bills have performed well all year. They only had 3 losses. 2 of them came when they had to experience COVID issues with the Titans. Actually, 1 loss, I'm sorry. Their other loss came on the Hail Murray play, and then their last loss came against the Chiefs. So when you really look at it, they didn't really have that many bad losses this year. They had a lot of key wins as well. I think Josh Allen has looked phenomenal all year. He's in the MVP talk, and I think their offense could put up with the Chiefs. Do I think they can go into Kansas City and actually defeat them? I think that remains to be seen. I think they got a tough road to Kansas City if it happens to get there. But I think, just as James said, they're probably a year or 2 away.
It's hard for me to count out the Buffalo Bills right now as we speak. The Kansas City Chiefs, even though they're winning, they are not playing like they were in the middle of the year or in the beginning of the year. Those wins aren't very pretty wins, and we know the famous Al Davis quote, "Just win, baby." It's all that matters. Is no matter how you do it, no matter if it's pretty, if it's ugly, a win's a win, right? But there's something that's not clicking between all of them. Their run defense is not very good. Mahomes, sure, he's the best quarterback in the game. People know how high I've been on Mahomes and those Chiefs. There's just something that they don't look the same. And there's some teams who play down to their competition throughout the regular season. Sure, I get all that. Mahomes didn't play in Week 17. He's obviously not playing this weekend and Wild Card weekend. So once you get to the divisional round, that's 2 weeks. That's 2 full weeks that he hasn't played. Sure, that could be good. Maybe mentally it's good for him. And another way you could look at it is he's a little rusty. But with the Buffalo Bills, why I really, really can't rule them out. And all year, all I've tried to do is rule them out and count them out. The thing that's difficult about that is I'm always a believer in NFL, MLB, and NHL. I'm not a believer the team with the most talent is always going to win because that's literally not the case. There's facts in the past that back it up that the best team doesn't always win. The thing in the NFL, which I'm a big believer in, is momentum. Momentum is a thing in sports. Momentum is real. The team that is hot entering the postseason is probably the most dangerous team in the playoffs. The Bills have, I think, won 8 of their last 9 games, or like Chuck said, whatever the case may be. And their 1 loss came on the DeAndre Hopkins, Megatron, Calvin Johnson 2.0 Hail Mary miracle. So with that being said, with Josh Allen playing like an MVP caliber player, Stephon Diggs lead the league in catches and yards, been a security blanket for Josh Allen. Their run game has been very good. Their defense at times has looked really good. It's hard for me to believe that any other team outside of Kansas City can beat them. Can they go into Arrowhead and beat them? Would I pick them? No. But to rule them out, I think I can't rule them out right now.
So I think the run game is not that great. I think Singletary, I had him in fantasy. I was expecting big things from Singletary. He didn't really perform it. I don't think the run game is strong enough just now, and that's the part of their game that they need to work on to make me believe that they could win a Super Bowl.
It's not just Singletary, though. Josh Allen is another part of their rushing game, which opens up a lot of things for that offense. So it's not necessarily just Singletary. And as a team collectively, there's a lot of games they're rushing for over 100 yards. It's not necessarily Singleton is this elite back like the Nick Chubbs of the world, the Derrick Henrys of the world. No, he's not in that class. But as a team, rushing the ball, they're not bad behind Allen leading the way with his arm and his legs as well. So I don't believe there's really any other team outside the Chiefs that can dethrone them. I think the Colts would be a little bit of a stretch to say that they have a real fighter's chance going into Buffalo upstate, a team that plays indoors. But again, the Colts are a team, like, if you look around them, like, they're a good team that people are not talking about. Jonathan Taylor, who I've been high on since Wisconsin, I believe for quarterback Jack Cohen at Wisconsin, he's been a security blanket and a cheat code. He's like the Derrick Henry of college football, if you really want to look at it that way. And then in the NFL, this is rookie year as a second-round pick. He doesn't look half bad. And then you got T.Y. Hilton on the outside. Their defense is among the top in the league. So the Colts are a team that could be dangerous. Could we see the Colts even like make this game competitive or ultimately get an upset? Chuck, what do you think?
I think the Colts are a really good team. They finished the season 11-5, I believe. But Phil Rivers, and he chokes every year in the playoffs, and we've seen it time and time again since his Charger days. You know, when they won like 11 in a row, and then our Jets went in there and defeated them. So, yes, the Colts have a chance because they can run the ball with Taylor, like you said, and they play great defense. They're finally getting healthy. They got Buckner back. They got Leonard back. Those are really two key guys in that middle of the defense. Although I do think they might have a problem in their secondary and matching up against Stephon Diggs. And Rocketson has been beaten in coverage all year long. It happened to him in the Pittsburgh game where the Colts get out to that early lead, and then Ben just marched the Steelers right back downfield, especially in the second half. So I think the secondary might have a little issues with covering Diggs on Sunday or Saturday, whenever they play. But I think it's going to come down to Philip Rivers. And how many times do we see Philip Rivers not able to move in the pocket and he throws up that little sidearm prayer and he gets picked off? So I think having Philip Rivers play a clean game where he can move the ball downfield. T.Y. Hilton has looked good lately. Michael Pittman is great. He's got to get his tight ends involved, and Doyle and Mo Alley-Cox. So I think Rivers will be the X factor for the Colts to pull up the upset. And if he doesn't play, and if he plays like Philip Rivers of years past, they're not going to win.
James, what do you think? Are the Colts?
I think Rivers has a really good season, and I kind of took a bit of the mick out of him at the beginning of the season because he didn't look great, and it did take a long time to really settle into Indianapolis kind of set. So he has come good, and he's got them to the playoffs. Off some pretty big performances from him that, you know, a couple of years ago he was struggling, and they'd won games on the back of him really kind of willing his way through games, and they have done it so quietly. Like you say, no one's really talking about the Colts. They have done it quietly. They just went about their business and bossed it, and they deserve their playoff run. But I think it comes to an end on Saturday. I don't think they can beat the Bills. On our podcast, I took the Bills to win by a touchdown because I just think that it will be a close game. And I think it will be a high-scoring game. I think the defenses have got their works cut out for them this weekend. But I think the Bills win out. And Rivers, I mean, he's talked about retirement if they didn't make the playoffs. I wonder how he feels if they go out on Saturday in the wildcard game.
So, speaking of betting, the Bills are 6.5-point favorites right now. Can we see the Colts covering this spread? I mean, I feel like a lot of people think Bills at home. They have the momentum on their side. They're hot. Philip Rivers not a big playoff guy in terms of his career. He's had multiple letdowns, as Chuck brought up earlier in this topic. But is Vegas onto something? Can we really see the Colts really make this a close game and cover the spread for the bettors out there? I know a lot of people are going to be throwing some money around. Chuck, what do you think?
I think James hit on the head where it's probably going to be a close. I think the key for the Colts also is they need the speed on their defense to counterattack Devin Singletary, Zach Moss, and Josh Allen in the run game. If they could do that and get sideline to sideline, because you know the Bills are going to try to run, you know, with the run pass options and you know the regular options where Allen might roll out. I think if they could defend that, they have very good sideline to sideline speed. So if they could handle that, it could be a close game. And I think they have to score early. Buffalo is allowing fans into the stadium. That place is going to go, wow. We all know how Bills Mafia is. They're in the parking lot jumping through, tables. So having them in the crowd is just going to keep gassing up that team. And if they could kind of like deflate that and get off to a quick start, I think they could very well cover. If I was a betting man, I think I would take Buffalo because I think they're going to get off to a hot start. That place is going to go crazy, and they need this win more than anything. They're so overdue. It's been like 20 years, I think, at the very least, since they even won a playoff game. So I think Buffalo's going to get their win.
James?
Yeah, I think Vegas is spot on. Like I say, I took the Bills by 7. I think they win it by a touchdown, maybe even a wee bit more. But I was kind of hedging my bets a little bit because I think Philip Rivers, you can't come out this season. He has had a particularly good season, and he probably his wife probably wants more kids. What's he got, like 9 just now? So he probably needs a couple extra years of salary in the NFL to keep him going. Rivers is good. The Colts have been good. They've went about their business really quietly, and they've kind of snuck up on teams. But it comes to an end this Saturday, and the Bills, and I think Diggs, I think there's going to be a last-minute kind of score, and I think we're going to see like a trademark now of Allen to Diggs, and I think it'll be a really good game, and I'm so glad there's going to be fans in the stadium to see this. It's going to be so good to have fans there, get some atmosphere. I know it's a limited amount of fans, but it's still going to be awesome to have some fans in there.
All right, here's the thing with that. It's matchup-wise, I want to say the Colts will cover. I do. I like what they got. Like I already stressed, Jonathan Taylor in the backfield. You got some key receivers. Philip Rivers, an experienced quarterback, a great defense. I'm always the one who says I'm a believer that defense wins championships. If you have a good defense, you have a great defense, you will beat any game, and you are a team teams need to be scared about. But I got 2 words that Chuck kind of already addressed, but why I can't bet against the Bills. Bills Mafia. With fans in the stadium, with how electric those fans get, they're honestly, like, as a Jets fan, it pains me to say this, those are probably the most loyal and best fans in the world. I got to be straight up with the fans, whoever's watching this right now. It's kind of hard for me to bet on the Bills, but I think the Colts' path to victory and keeping this close is get ahead early and make the Bills play catch-up. If that's the case, if they get established around early with Jonathan Taylor, if Philip Rivers could be throwing the ball all down the field and exposing that defense, that Bills defense has not been all that consistent, if we're going to be honest with ourselves. So if that's the case, I could see the Colts pulling away with this one or even covering the spread, but ideally I don't think that's going to happen. I'm going to have to take the Bills. But I want to flip the script a little bit to the NFC. Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson has been a guy who was in the MVP conversation to start the year. He's a guy who's never had an MVP vote in his life. But the first 7-8 games, he looked like he was going to take this MVP award unanimously. And during that stretch is when the defense was at their worst. They were the 32nd ranked defense in the league. The very worst. That secondary was getting eaten alive. Jamal Adams missed time. But it seemed to be when Jamal Adams came back, that defense came back to life a little bit, and they look pretty decent. I believe their last 4 or 5 games or something, they've held their teams under 20 points a game in terms of average. But entering this postseason, is anything less than a Super Bowl run a failure for Russell Wilson's legacy? Especially this year, he has a guy like DK Metcalf by his side, who's arguably, if you're going to ask me, a top 2 to 3 receiver in the league. James, we'll start with you.
I think Wilson, for his legacy, I mean, he has already won a Super Bowl or 2, so he's pretty much up there. But, like, I love the start of the season. He didn't throw an interception for like the first 3 or 4 games either. He looked so good. And that, like you said, that defense was horrendous. And it's still not, I don't think it's any great shakes even now. But whether this affects his legacy, I don't think, certainly not in Seattle, maybe in terms of the league, but Seattle love him. And I think if he brings home another Super Bowl, then they'll love him for it. And I think the league would applaud him for it. But it's just a shame, actually, that he dropped out kind of midway through the season in terms of his own performances, because I would really have loved for him to win an MVP because he's been in the league so far, and like you say, he's never had a vote. So it would have been nice, but sadly not to be this year.
In my opinion, I don't think it really hurts his legacy because nobody really considers Seattle like a favorite. They're not the Saints, they're not the Packers, they're not the Chiefs. They're not. I guess you could throw the Bills in there. And we know what the weaknesses are of the Seahawks. They play poorly in cover defense, and their offensive line is not too good either. They really can't rush the passer, even though they got I think it was Geno Atkins from the Bengals or Carlos Dunlap. Either or they got at the trade deadline. But I think Seattle has this hole, and I don't really consider them a Super Bowl favorite. Now, if Russell can take that team to the Super Bowl and even win it, then yes, that would be a big, huge check on his legacy because of what he did. But I don't think we really see as the Seahawks as a team that can go into New Orleans or into Green Bay and, become the NFC champions. So I don't really think it's a legacy on Russ. And I know he played good earlier on in the year, but he did the same thing last year too, where he was the MVP front runner for, the first 6-7 weeks of the season, and then he fell off. Last year he lost to Lamar, and now this year it's probably going to be Aaron Rodgers. So I don't think we're giving the Seahawks a chance, so I don't think it really could affect his legacy.
I do think this is a little bit of a stain on his legacy. Listen, is he a first ballot Hall of Famer? Sure. We know how great he is when we're going to look back in time. But this is a guy who's been compared to the top quarterbacks in the league. He's been compared to, on a year-to-year basis, to guys of names of Patrick Mahomes, guys of the name of the Aaron Rodgers, a guy named Tom Brady. Russell Wilson has been in the conversation with all of these guys consistently. There was a stretch where people thought he was the best quarterback in the game. And then the Malcolm Butler play happened where he threw the interception where they lost. And then it seems like he never really bounced back to being that guy. And then last year, the way he performed, it looked like he was coming back to that top quarterback in the league. And we saw that again this year, the first half of the year. And then right as the defense started to figure it out a little bit, that's where he started to fall off. So for me, in terms of like what Seattle's going to look at him after he leaves or retires, of course they're going to love him. He's been the best quarterback in that franchise history, and he delivered a Super Bowl, which one Super Bowl to a fan base, especially who's not accustomed to seeing championships like the Seahawks really haven't been. That lasts a lifetime. You're always going to be regarded as a hero. But the thing about Russell Wilson and the Seahawks of why I feel like this is a failure on his legacy if he really gets outperformed, because I don't believe any team in the NFC is the true favorites. Am I going to pick Seattle? No. If you follow me on my sports podcast on the Falco Takeaway, you've heard me numerous times saying the Seahawks are the biggest pretenders in the NFC. I don't believe in them. And it never had anything to do with Russell Wilson. It was always believing the Seahawks had the worst defense in the league. And I'm not a believer. If you have a bottom 5 defense, I'm just not a believer that you are ever going to win. I believe some way along the lines that something will go wrong given by what your defense did, and your defense just straight up failed you, which is looked like what Seattle has done. But if Russell Wilson gets outplayed by any quarterback in this playoff run, this is a failure because the Packers, as great as they are, Aaron Rodgers is going to win MVP. We all know that. Devontae Adams, if you're going to ask me, maybe even the best receiver in the league. The Packers are another team who just consistently had playoff failures in the past decade. And there's times where they looked like they were going to come out of the NFC and people picked them, and what do you know? It's another failure some way, somehow. Sometimes it's the defense. Sometimes Rodgers doesn't play to his capability. The Saints, on the other hand, it's really hard for me to bet on this Saints team to win a championship at all. Last year, he got outplayed by his teammate Taysom Hill, and he also got outplayed by Kirk Cousins. So for me to believe that this is the year for the Saints, I don't in any stretch of the imagination. We know the pass interference call that really probably changed the outcome of this game, and then what was that? Was that Stephon Diggs too with that miracle
Yeah.
The Stephon Diggs miracle at the Superdome. So it's like there's not any teams who are the clear favorite in the NFC. I believe the NFC is wide open. The team that's going to come out of the NFC is who is playing the hottest, whose defense could contain other teams' great quarterbacks, and it's going to come down to quarterback play. And with Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf on the side and Carl Carson in the backfield, I feel like it's hard to believe there's really any excuses that defense could hold up. That's kind of my take on it.
I think when you talk about the Packers, Aaron Rodgers has been angry all season long. They drafted a quarterback to come in for him, and he, from game 1 to game 16, he played angry, and he had a big chip on his shoulder. Now, Aaron Rodgers has always had a bit of a chip on his shoulder anyway. But one thing that's been different this year from Aaron is that when I can't remember which receiver it was, but a receiver really cocked up and he lost the game because of it. And instead of, calling him out on TV and stuff, he kind of came out and it was almost as if he put his arm around the guy and said, you know what, these things happen. We'll get next week's game. And that's like a different attitude that we've seen from Aaron Rodgers than ever before. So I think the attitude change from him goes throughout that team because he's the leader of that team. He's been there for a long time and he's very well respected. And I think he's even more respected now by the younger players because he has done that and kind of got his arm around the younger player and said, no, let's, don't worry about that. Put it at the back of your mind. Let's go out next week and win. And that's why I think Green Bay make the championship game and end up in the Super Bowl.
Chuck, thoughts on that before we switch gears?
Yeah, I kind of agree. I think the Packers are the team to beat, especially because they have home field. And Lambeau could play well to their advantage in these playoffs. Do you really think Drew Brees, with 20 billion broken ribs and all the other injuries he suffered, can really go into a cold Lambeau field and play to his top level that we've seen him playing before? I don't think so. And the Saints are a dome team, so they're going to be going to a cold weather city. Now, that's if, they beat, I guess, Seattle, if you want to say if Seattle could beat the Rams. But, I think just as you guys said, this is Aaron Rodgers' year. Won MVP with ease. This is his redemption because they took a quarterback and that lighted a fire under him. And he went out there and he showed, hey, I'm still the guy. So now, I don't want to say, it's guaranteed that the Packers are just going to, waltz their way to the Super Bowl. I think you got to consider other factors involved. And like Brandon said, any given Sunday, you just got to go out there and win. And that's why I love the NFL playoffs so much because it's not the same as the other sports where, you got a best of 5 or a best of 7. This is just one and done. So if you don't bring your A game, you're done. But I do think the Packers are going to have the bye to rest up. Then they get to play at their own stadium. They're probably going to play the winner of Washington, Tampa Bay. So, I don't even think I could see Tom Brady going into Lambeau and doing that, rolling out, throwing to, maybe he doesn't have a Mike Evans and he has to rely on Scotty Miller or Antonio Brown. It's going to be tough for a lot of teams. And I think we've seen over where Lambeau could be a factor. And, that's what I'm hanging my hat on. But we also, speaking of home field, you could also say that about the Seahawks. Seattle doesn't play fairly too well when they're away from Seattle. And, they got the 12s and everything. Now, this year was a little different, obviously. But do you really think that Seattle can go down to New Orleans and really, win, especially if the Saints have fans in the building? Those people down south, they're crazy. So, it's gonna be a fun playoff ride. I really wouldn't put too much stake into Wilson's legacy, even though he is a premier quarterback. But I just don't see Seattle, being that favorite to go to the Super Bowl.
I want to head to the AFC for a few topics before we go back to the NFC a little bit. The Ravens are 3.5-point favorites against the Titans. And looking at this line, it was very sketchy. If there's any bettors out there, this is probably a great topic to tune into. Especially I'm very experienced with this, if anybody. Last year, we know what happened. The Ravens were the 1 seed. They were heavy favorites. And the Ravens got Derrick Henry. Derrick Henry gave you 195 yards on the ground, absolutely annihilated the Ravens on the ground, and it established the game. I believe Ryan Tannehill threw for under 100 yards that game, and they still had no answer for Henry. So the Ravens, even though they're game planning for Henry, they know it's coming, but then Lamar Jackson still's got to get that monkey off his back. Having the MVP year last year, he was unbelievable during the regular season. But I kept saying, entering that postseason, I said, watch out. He's not proven he could play in the playoffs. The regular season and the postseason are two different words, and they are literally two different seasons. When you're good in the regular season and Lamar Jackson has put his best foot forward, The Ravens were good because they always got ahead early. And once they get ahead early, they can establish the run game, and then Lamar Jackson could do his thing, running the ball, extending plays. That's where he's at his best. But when the Ravens find themselves down early, it seems like they have no chance. But now they're on the road going into Tennessee, the team that just defeated them on the road. So why are the Ravens a 3.5-point favorite? Does Vegas know something that we don't know? Or are we still expecting the Titans to, quote-unquote, pull off an upset? James, we'll start with you.
So I take the Titans. I took the Titans in this game. I took them by 3. I didn't realize that was the line anyway, but I took them by 3. I fully believe in Derrick Henry, and I think history will repeat itself. I think he will run wild all over the Ravens, and the Ravens' defense is just going to have to burrow up because they are not going to be able to cope. And they're going to have to rely heavily on Lamar to put points on the board. And I've not seen him very consistent. He's certainly not been an MVP caliber as he was last year. He has come good in the last couple of weeks, and maybe he's finding that momentum that you were talking about earlier. But against Derrick Henry, against Ryan Tannehill, who has actually been pretty good this season, and it's been quite interesting to see that when Henry's maybe taking a couple of runs off and Tannehill throws a couple and they just pick up extra yards, and Tannehill's actually been pretty decent. I'm never been a big Tannehill fan, but he's kind of impressed me somewhat this year. But Henry is an absolute beast, and he will go through 1, 2, 3, 4 tackles, and then just for good measure, he'll go through a 5th. And if you ever watch Good Morning Football on NFL Network, I mean, he wins the Angry Runs award pretty much every week. So I just think he's a beast, and I just think there is no answer for what he can do. I mean, if we compare it to British rugby, you had Jonah Luma, who was an absolute beast, and he just ran through people, and he would have guys on his back as he was running, and they just couldn't take him down. Derrick Henry is the equivalent in the NFL, and no one's going to – I just can't see them taking him down.
Chuck?
As we know in the betting world, the home team usually gets, 3 points, a field goal. So for the Ravens to be favored by 3, that means there's about a touchdown difference going forward. I think the Ravens are only favored because of the way that the two teams finished the season. The Ravens played very hot during their past couple of games. Lamar got back from COVID. He's starting to look like his old self. They got the running game going with J.K. Dobbins. Marquise Brown has finally come alive after he, cried that he didn't get the ball enough. So the Ravens, have started to pick it up on offense, and their defense is still pretty good. I believe they finished as a top 5 defense in the league. So the Ravens are more of a complete team than the Titans, and we knew that before the season even kicked off. The Ravens were the better team. They were probably number 2 behind the Titans, but they did falter in the very beginning. I believe at one point they were below 500. So now that they're starting to roll, I think it's just them saying, hey, the Ravens are the better team. It's probably like a touchdown difference. I think last year the Ravens were favored by double digits, which is a crazy difference between now and then.
I believe it was 10. I know the money line was minus 420.
Yeah, that's absurd. So I think the problem also with the Titans that you looked at is that defense has gotten cooked. And, they are so bad. They have injuries all over the place. I think they do get Christian Fulton, the cornerback, I believe he went to LSU. I think he comes back for this game, which is very key. But that defense has too many holes. They don't even have a pass rush, especially since they lost Clowney early on in the year. They can't get to the quarterback, and I think that's been their problem of late. The quarterback could sit in the pocket all day, extend plays, and they don't have the pass rush. And that's not going to play well up against Lamar Jackson, who can just take off or stay in the pocket. So I think between that, plus the Titans' injuries to their offensive line, I know Henry rushed for over 200 yards against the Texans, but the Texans' defense, I'm sure that one of us 3 could probably do that against Houston. So I think by the Texans' defense playing, the Titans' defense playing so poorly and the Ravens playing so hot, I think that's why the Ravens are favored. Would I take the Ravens? I think I'm staying far away from this game. I'm just going to sit back and just drink a nice cold beer and just watch it.
Well, James, I'm sorry you fell for the Vegas trap because the Ravens are favored for a reason, and this is going to be Vegas is cashing out in this game. I'm very confident of that. I had a bold prediction, I guess, before the beginning of the year when everyone was so high in the Ravens that the Ravens were going to go 16-0. Lamar Jackson, they told me on NFL Network he was the best player in the game, which is ridiculous. But with that being said, I said the Ravens will not win a playoff game this year. I don't think that take is going to age too well. The only reason I literally believe that is because of the line. I'm telling you right now, Vegas knows things we don't know. When there's a line that looks too good to be true, there's always a reason behind it. I could point out a bunch of games this year where that exactly happened, and this is the Vegas game that Vegas is going to cash out. And here's why. Everyone is going to look at this game, like I addressed before, and say, oh, look, history repeats itself. Last year, the Ravens, heavy favorites. At home, the MVP, best player in the league. Like, oh my God, like, of course the Ravens are going to steamroll over the Titans. Not so fast. And then this year, why I really believe that this line is what it is, it's hard to beat a team twice in a calendar year. It is. And then in reality, if you look at 2 calendar years, because you beat them in the playoffs, obviously, and then they beat them this year. I think the biggest difference of what's going to establish this game is the first quarter of this game will tell you everything you need to know about this game. I believe the Ravens are the favorite because when they get up early in games, they're a pretty good team, and that's where they're a tough team to beat. I believe if the Ravens get up early and the Titans are going to try to play catch-up, again, if the Ravens are up early, you can't really establish the run game with Derrick Henry. As much of a cheat code as he is, and again, he's my pick for MVP. If I had to vote for MVP, I would absolutely give Derrick Henry my first place vote. But the thing is, if the Ravens get up early and establish a lead, it's going to be hard for Ryan Tannehill to throw them back in this game because I believe a similar situation with Lamar. I don't believe that Lamar Jackson could throw you back in the games as well as Ryan Tannehill. I believe Ryan Tannehill is a product of Derrick Henry. Tannehill had never had any year similar to this. The reason why that he's had such a great year is because Derrick Henry rushed for 2,000 yards and 17 touchdowns. When you're establishing that run game early, it opens up the play action, it helps you extend plays, it helps receivers get open, create separation. With all that being said, but the thing that people are not talking about the Titans, which is their Achilles heel, their defense. Their defense has been atrocious of late and to end the season. Again, I'm a big believer that defense wins championships. If Lamar Jackson and that Ravens offense is running all over that defense early and they go up early, that's how they're going to win this game. So as much as my take all year that the Ravens won't win a playoff game, at one point we didn't think they would make it, I don't think that take's going to age very well. This is just too much of a Vegas trap. So as I looked at this game deeper and someone who has a lot of experience between lines, betting, where the public is, the public will be heavy on the Titans. And the public is going to get absolutely annihilated because of that. If you look between the lines of why that line looks too good to be true, I believe what I just said is exactly why, and that's probably what's going to happen. What are your thoughts?
So the Vegas know that like the Titans are going to go down with COVID again. So I believe that the Titans defense has not been what it was at the beginning of the season. But one thing that always comes true is that teams play differently in playoffs, whether that be NBA, NHL, or the NFL. And there's a level of intensity that comes with playing in the playoffs. And sometimes you see defenses play 50% better than they did in the regular season because it's the playoffs and there's so much at stake. And that was why I was giving it to the Titans. I think their defense, although it's been poor, I think they have that kind of playoff buzz about them. And they know they can beat the Ravens. They've done it before, and that they come in and they it's not going to be a walkover by any stretch, but I just think they outlast the Ravens more than anything else.
I think what's really important is for the Titans to get the passing game going early on, because once you open up that passing game, it opens up the play action. You know Derrick Henry's going to go out there and do his thing. I think not even getting A.J. Brown involved, but getting Corey Davis involved. And Corey Davis is playing for a contract. I believe he's a free agent after this year. So, he's going to want the ball, and he's going to go out there, like James just said, and, play that extra 50%. So I think by getting Tannehill going and getting into a groove, I think that's going to open up a bunch of avenues for them on offense. And on defense, I think they got to stop the run game early on. I think I would force Lamar to throw the ball. You want to see Lamar throw the ball at least 40 times in this game because that means that you stop the run game. And Dobbins has looked really good since he came back from COVID. So I think by beefing up the middle of the field and just letting Lamar, try to throw to Marquise Brown and guys like Willie Snead, and I guess even covering up Mark Andrews over the middle, I think he's a big facet in their offense. So starting to eliminate, the keys to the Ravens is going to be key for the Titans. So I understand why Vegas made this line. Yes, it is a fishy line without a doubt. That's why I'm staying away from it. It's going to be a really good game. Will it be like the one that we saw earlier on where they went into overtime? I don't know. I think it's going to come down to which defense can stop the run game first.
Well, a few things to that. The Titans have no any stretch of the imagination to think they're going to try to establish the passing game first. We know what their game plan is. We know what their game plan is every single week. It's give the ball to Derrick Henry. Teams know it's going to happen. They try to pack the box. They send extra rushers. And you do nothing about it, just about every single week. Like, you can't tell me with a straight face, you put on a Titans game, and you don't know when Derrick Henry's getting the ball, and there's nothing any team can do about it. I really believe it's going to be, the first quarter will tell you a lot about this game. Any bettors out there, if you want a live bet after the first quarter, that might be your best bet than taking this game beforehand. Because
Wait. I'm sorry to cut you off. Just one more thing that I just remembered.
Right.
The Titans' kickers have been abysmal all year. Gostkowski has been bad. The kicker that they had against the Texans in Week 17, the guy looked like a linebacker trying to run on the field. So when you really think about it, if the Titans have to settle for field goals, you got to make sure that they could put the points on the board. And I would be very worried if I was a Titans fan or have money on the Titans, because if they start missing, a field goal here and a field goal there, it starts to add up. So you got to make sure, you got to see what they're going to be doing kicking-wise. And if they could only kick, maybe 40-yarders or even 45-yarders max, they're going to be in a lot of trouble.
That was the nail on the head. I disagree with what you said in terms of trying to establish the passing game first. But I do agree, like, if Lamar Jackson throws the ball 40 times in this game, the Ravens lost. I think that's a direct stat I could look at and say, if this happens, they're not winning. The kicking game. That could be one of the – I totally forgot about that. He barely made that last field goal, hit the upright, bounce through. I totally forgot about that. People really underestimate how important your kicker is to your roster. Part of the reason why the Chiefs are so good is because Harrison Butker is really the best kicker in the league. Last year, the Ravens were so great, Justin Tucker was that guy. When the Titans don't have a kicker right now, when you leave easy points on the board, that adds up. That could be the turning point in this game that I did not realize. Good point. I totally forgot about that. James, you have any final thoughts?
Don't you think that kickers in general this season have actually been terrible? Like, right across the board. You watch games and, like, you're looking at 30-yard kicks and they're hitting posts.
The Jets? Oh, God. Can we talk about
the Jets. They're like a different breed.
Oh, man. But I want to switch gears to another AFC team, the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Cleveland Browns. I've always said the Browns are figuratively and literally the wild card team in these playoffs. Literally because they literally have the wild card spot. And figuratively, I don't believe anyone knows what to expect with the Browns. Like, there are teams, some weeks they look like one of the best teams in the league. Baker Mayfield, sometimes he looks like a top 10 quarterback. And there's other times he literally looks like a bottom 3 quarterback next to Cam Newton or whatever. So with that being said, the Steelers not only limping in the playoffs in terms of linebacker injuries, their running game went to the toilet bowl. I don't think you could actually draw up a worse running game. Ben Roethlisberger, as I compared multiple times, is as mobile as the Tin Man in the pocket. He literally looks like the Statue of Liberty. When you try to ask Roethlisberger to throw the ball more and win you games, that's where he's liable and that's where he makes more mistakes. And this late in his career, I don't think he was the guy he was a decade ago. So, Chuck, I want to start with you. Are the Steelers on upset alert?
I would have said yes to this question 4 days ago. And what has changed is the Browns still having, COVID issues and losing their head coach. I think we're underestimating what Kevin Stefanski means to that offense. He is their play caller. He is the head. He is their guy on the sideline. And for him to not be there is very worrisome. Now, I will say, though, I would start worrying about the Steelers if the Browns jump out to an early lead, only because they could run the ball and milk the clock. You got Chubb, you got Hunt, best duo in the league by far. They can use that to their advantage. But it's all going to come down to Baker Mayfield. How will he do under pressure from TJ Watt? Yes, you are correct. They lost Devin Bush and Bud Dupree in the middle of the field. But I do think the Steelers could overcome that because of Mike Hilton, who is a cornerback who comes on the blitz and is probably one of the better blitzing corners in the league. So I think we're going to have to see how Baker handles the pressure. He's going to have to get his legs going, escape the pocket, extend the plays, having his full complement of receivers back, even though they had them last week. But I like to give them another week, beyond the COVID issues. So getting Landry involved early over the middle, throwing the ball to Hollywood Higgins, right? I think getting these guys going on offense and moving the ball on the Steelers defense will force Ben to have to start doing some things. And like you said, Ben cannot move in the pocket. I think his elbow's hurting him. I think his knee is hurting him. So having him to go out there and throw, 40, 50 times is not well. They're going to need to run the ball with James Conner. So I think the Steelers are not on upset alert as of right now, January 8th at, 2:50 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. But heading into that game, watching it, if you see the Browns jump out early, then I think the sirens will start going where the Steelers might be in trouble.
James?
So I when it comes to playoffs, I always look at experience. Baker Mayfield has zero experience in playoffs, and Ben Roethlisberger has a wealth of experience. And quite a few years ago now, we've seen the Denver Broncos win a Super Bowl with a guy with a broken back. Guys can play hurt, and I think Ben Roethlisberger has had a week off. He's had his extra bye week that he was looking for, and he comes out and he's well rested. I don't think he's a momentum guy. I think he's just a solid player. So I think a week off for him does him a world of good, and I think it does the Steelers a world of good as well, because then they could just go in with so much oomph just from Roethlisberger, because his arm, he may have a sore shoulder, a sore elbow, whatever, but his arm is so good and so accurate. On the flip side, the thing that scares me the most is that two-headed monster of Kareem Hunt and Nick Chubb. They are scarily good. And when they both get going, I think they can take any team they want if they both get going. I'd even say they'd give the Chiefs a run. But for me, I think they need more of a passing game. Obviously, Baker Mayfield has done so well without Odell Beckham Jr. and without pieces here and there. And I think he's done really well to improve as a player. And I think he lost that whole attitude that he had, because he had a big attitude last season. This season he's come in, he's been a lot quieter, and he's went about his business and done really well. And to be fair, I hated him last season. I thought he was an arrogant pain in the butt. But this year I've kind of got a lot of respect for him, just the way he's went about things. I'm taking Pittsburgh in this. And if the Browns get a lead, I think the experience of Ben Roethlisberger and that team, you've got Claypool, who has been outstanding for them as a young player. I think Steelers could reel them back in and take a tight win.
I think you're both totally wrong. A few things to that. The only point I will agree with has some things is the Browns missing their head coach. Does that play a part in it? Sure. I could give you that. I'm always a believer in NFL, NBA, definitely not NBA, the NHL and MLB. The teams who are hot, the teams who are ending the season hot, are the teams you want to be are dangerous moving forward. The Steelers have been the complete opposite of that. You're injured in the linebacking core. There's problems in the secondary. Ben Roethlisberger again looks like the Tin Man, literally the Tin Man in the pocket. They lost before. I won't count Week 17 because all their backups played. But to wrap up the season, they lost 3 out of their 4 last games. I think the Steelers are scared. I don't think they're confident. I don't think they have good chemistry right now. They have a lot of red flags entering this Sunday. I don't believe they're playing with confidence. They're not playing with momentum. They're trying to play it safe. they're trying to play like, okay, we can't lose. We can't get upset by a division rival team in the Cleveland Browns. With that being said, once upon a time, if you go back in 2009 and 2010, the rookie and sophomore Mark Sanchez went into 4 road games and the Jets pulled off victories. A lot of that had to do with that defense, of course, but if you want to talk about experience, Mark Sanchez literally outplayed Tom Brady in a playoff game. That did happen. He also outplayed Peyton Manning in a playoff game. Those things literally did happen. He outplayed Philip Rivers in a playoff game. That literally did happen. Baker Mayfield, sure, is going to be the X factor in this game. The thing with the Browns, their game planning against the Steelers is very, 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 very simple. They don't have a run game. That's no threat. You know they have to throw the ball in the air. Roethlisberger is going to have to throw the ball 40 to 50 times in this game, and I do not trust him to do that this late in his career, as unathletic as he is, as much of probably elbow problems he has. Juju Smith-Schuster is probably too worrying about doing the Corvette TikTok dance on midfield. With that being said, that running back duo that the Cleveland Browns had is going to be the X factor. Nick Chubb, Kareem Hunt, that is a deadly duo. If that running game gets going early, it is over. Baker Mayfield, I always say, is the liability of this team. They will go as far as he goes. And I'm not trying to make this a it's all about what the quarterback does. It's not a one-on-one quarterback matchup, because it's not. The thing with Baker Mayfield, which I addressed when I opened up this topic, is sometimes he looks like a top 10 quarterback. Other times he looks like next to the worst quarterback, next to Cam Newton or Sam Darnold to an extent. Like, that's the difference between what Baker Mayfield has done. There's some games he throws for 5 touchdowns and 400 yards. Another game he'll throw for a touchdown, 3 picks, and a fumble. So with that being said, we don't know what's to expect from him. And it's a division rival game. Remember that. No matter the difference in talent in a divisional game, there's always some extra spice from the underdog team, and always something where a division game is just going to be close. There's no math or logic or science behind it. It's just a fact. It's just things that happen. An underdog team will always give a favorite in your division a tough time. So yes, the Steelers are on high upset alert. They feel it. They feel the pressure. They're not confident. They do not have the momentum on their side. I am picking the Cleveland Browns to pull an upset off on Sunday night against the Pittsburgh Steelers.
So you mentioned confidence, and I have a source, a very good source in Pittsburgh, who tells me that confidence is not a problem that they have. They've enjoyed their week off, and they are ready and practicing hard, which is something the Browns haven't been doing, to win this game on Sunday this game.
Sunday.
Yeah. So I think the Steelers, I don't think confidence is a problem. Momentum maybe, but I think you have to practice as a team. And the Browns are doing virtual practices, which are about as much use as a chocolate fire guard, to be fair. So I think the head coach thing and the COVID thing has come at the worst time for the Browns. There's no doubt about that. I mean, if they'd had it early in the season, like the Titans or anyone else, then fair enough. But this is a really it's a shame that this has happened at this time, because I think this game could be like game of the week if things were different. But I guess you got to play the cards you're dealt.
There's this one word I want to talk about. It's spelled L-I-E, lie. That is a complete lie that the Steelers have any confidence on their side. You can't be that confident after losing 3 of your last 4 games. They were 11-0 at one point, and people were talking about 16-0. And then you drop 3 games in a row, and that first loss came against Washington, a team that does not even have a name to them, after you were up 14-0 in that game. With that being said, of course they can't come on national TV or whatever source it may be and say, oh, we're confident, we feel great after you lost 3 out of 4 games. No, you don't. You feel the pressure. In anything you do in life, if you're struggling lately, you can't just say your confidence is the same it's been all year. They do not feel the same right now as they do 11-0. That is not my opinion. That's called it's common sense and it's logic looking back at that. So not for 1 second am I to believe that the Steelers have any confidence in this game. The pressure's on them. The Browns don't have a lot of pressure on them. I'm not going to say the Browns don't have anything to play for, because they have to play for literally their season and a game. They have nothing to lose. Yeah, it's called the season and the game. So with that being said, there's still more pressure on the Steelers given that people were trying to say that this team is going to compete with the Chiefs. They're going to compete with the Bills. Ben Roethlisberger's that dude again. But they had a cupcake schedule. And in the words of Bill Parcells, he always said, your record says what you are. Sure, that's the vanilla way to say it or however you want to put it. But with that being said, I do not believe that the Steelers are that 12-4 team like they're coming out as. When you play really bad teams and you win, that does mean something. And a lot of those wins weren't very pretty wins. And again, I love the Al Davis quote, just win, baby. But with that being said, entering the postseason, I don't think this team is confident. I don't know if they're going to be ready for it. The only thing I'm worried about the Browns is not having their coach and the inconsistency of Baker Mayfield. But looking at the matchups, looking how the Browns have to game plan for this game, I like them a lot.
Well, to go off what the both of you said, Brandon, I'm going to start with you real quick. You are absolutely right. The Steelers do feel pressure, and the Browns, they're pretty much playing with house money. Nobody expects them to win. So when a team has that, playing loose, who knows what the hell they can do? And you are right. It is a divisional game, but I think of all my years watching football, I don't think I've ever seen the Browns beat the Steelers. I mean, besides, the game last week where, the Steelers backers played, I've never seen the Browns defeat the Steelers. I do agree with James also. I think the Steelers have a lot of veterans on that team. And not only that, they have Mike Tomlin on the sidelines. And I love Mike Tomlin. I think he's going to get his guys ready for this game. I think they know what's at stake. I think they got Super Bowl aspirations. So I think they're going to get up for this game. I don't think they're just going to lay down. But I think the Browns getting off to an early lead could start to, I believe they'll start feeling the pressure then. I think going to opening kickoff, I think the Steelers will have full confidence in themselves.
I've got a really cool stat for you. There are 13 high schools in Pittsburgh, that have won more games at Heinz Field than the Cleveland Browns.
Exactly.
Hey, things are meant to change. Things change, right? But I want to switch gears after we talk about that. I want to flip back to the NFC. Thomas Edward Patrick Brady Jr. Does he have number 7 in him still? At age 43, after most people, I was guilty of it at one point, I'm not going to lie, people said he is washed. People have classified Tom Brady as washed. He's better off retiring. These are, the Buccaneer days are, quote-unquote, Jordan's Wizard days. But at age 43, he threw for 43 touchdowns, 5,000 yards. In the beginning of the season, he looked like a top 5 quarterback, looked like he was going to be in the MVP conversation. Had a stretch in November where I thought they were going to stride is where they went south, really south, like more south than Florida. And then in the end of December, they look really hot and they have the momentum on their side. Tom Brady and Bill Belichick with the Patriots have never made a Super Bowl without a first-round bye. So with that being said, history, sure, it repeats itself, but history says that Brady is not a guy who will take you to the Super Bowl playing on the road, and especially without that first-round bye. In this case, Tom Brady will have to play 3 straight road playoff games. James or Chuck, whoever wants to take this first. Does Tom Brady have number 7 in him?
Go ahead, James.
So he doesn't, is the simple answer. He has been really good for the Buccaneers. And like you say, I mean, I remember Jordan playing for the Wizards, and it was not pretty, and it was actually damn right ugly. But what we see with Brady is that they have put around him, unlike Jordan, they have put around him all his mates, and they've all come around to play football. So they brought in Gronk, they brought in Brown, and they've just put so many pieces around him that actually, if he did fail, it would be a massive failure. But the fact that he's gotten to the playoffs, the fact that he will most likely win this weekend, I think he's had a pretty good season. But has he got number 7 in him? No.
Chuck?
Let me say this. Yes, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers probably win Sunday. However, if Alex Smith was 100% healthy, I would be picking Washington for the upset. And as crazy as that may seem, I'm going to explain why. First, if Alex Smith was healthy, I think Alex Smith is a veteran quarterback. He knows how to control the offense, especially in a pressure game like this. And the football team has probably the best front seven in the league. And that's how you beat Tom Brady, with a pass rush. And Washington can do that. But I think in this game, I don't think Alex Smith looked terrible last night against Philadelphia. So that's why I'm picking Tampa Bay. And I think another issue that lies in Tampa Bay that nobody's talking about is the ongoing saga between Brady and Bruce Arians. And it kind of spilled out earlier on in the year, kind of like near the midway point. And I think now we're going to see it on full display because it is the postseason. Yeah, you can differ in play calling, during the season when you're playing teams like Atlanta, Carolina, the kind of like the walkovers of the NFL world. But now in a situation like this, what happens if they don't agree on, a play style or a play call? Then what happens? Are they going to, fight on the sideline? Who has the control? Does Tom Brady have the control as, probably one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time? Or Bruce Arians, who is the head coach? So it's going to be very interesting to see. And if you really notice it, they've kind of shied away from the running game. Ronald Jones, finally took control over the backfield and looked to be, what we thought he was coming out of USC, and then the run game kind of disappeared. But like Brendan said, they have played well of late, so I'm not going to harp on it too much. But I think watching, I don't want to say feud because it's not at that point yet, but watching the intensity between Arians and Brady and the play calling is going to be a big X factor for the Buccaneers during this entire playoffs as long as they last.
Here's the thing. I'm not very confident in any NFC team right now. They all have a flaw. They all have something that's like, I don't trust them. You don't have that trust in any team in the NFC like you do in the Kansas City Chiefs having home field advantage with the best player in the game, the best coach in the AFC. So with that being said, you really feel like, all right, that's a team you could trust and bank on. There's something that does not make me believe that the Packers are going to make it. I definitely don't believe in the Saints. I don't believe in the Seahawks. Tom Brady has number 7 in him. I am picking them to make the Super Bowl. Can Washington make this game interesting? Sure. Tom Brady is just a really tough guy to bet against. When you bet against him, when you think he's done, when you think he's losing, that's where you really lose. So with that being said, I am picking the Bucs to make the Super Bowl. I love what this team has all around. I feel like they have the most well-rounded team of any team in the NFC. You got a good defense. Sure, they struggled here and there, but they've shown to be a top defense. You have 2 studs in Chris Godwin and Mike Evans. Gronk looks like he's turning back the clock, and Brady is hitting his stride. He is not a guy that I feel very confident to bet against in January and the one game in February. You get the point. So with that being said, it's hard for me to bet on the Bucs right now. It's hard for me to bet against Tom Brady because all these other teams have more flaws than the Bucs. The only thing I could say with the Bucs, why I wouldn't believe them, is playing 3 road playoff games, and we know that is very hard to do. The only guy I remember doing anything close to that, I believe the Packers did when they won the Super Bowl. I believe they were the 6th seed and played 3 straight road playoff games and beat the Steelers in the Super Bowl. I don't know if any other team has done that since then, or I think the Giants had a similar run the year after or something, but that's besides the point. If there's one guy who could do it, it's Tom Brady. He's hot. The Bucs are hot. They are probably the most dangerous team in the NFC right now outside of Green Bay. So, yes, Tom Brady and the Buccaneers will win 3 straight playoff games and make the Super Bowl.
So what I'd give you, and I think you have to look at Brady's career, is December is always a good month for him. And it doesn't matter what happens in November or October, December is his month, and that's where he comes good. And the seasons that they have won Super Bowls in New England are seasons where December has been particularly good. He seems to just, the clock turns December and he suddenly starts playing so much better, hitting these guys. And because early on in the season, my issue was he couldn't throw a long ball to save himself. It was either 10 yards too long, 10 yards too short, and he was just miles off. He has now found his guys, and you can see him, and he's eyeing them up, and he is throwing it straight to hands. And that is a scary thing for any team that are going to go up against the Bucs. They do need to get that running game back. Ronald Jones, I think, needs to start taking more snaps and going for it. But can he make it number 7? I think it's a long stretch.
Well, with that being said, are the Bucks on upset alert? I believe they're 8 or 8.5 point favorites going into Washington. And if you really look what that front four is doing, Brady is mainly exposed when you can put pressure on him. If you can put pressure on Brady, he's absolutely not the same guy. So with the Washington's front four, and then Washington is a good team with Alex Smith. The reason why they are 7-9 entering these playoffs is Dwayne Haskins has been, talk about a bust. He's literally looks like the Anthony Bennett of the NFL, to be quite honest with you. So with that being said, is this a team that's getting overlooked because the NFC East is so bad? They were so bad with Dwayne Haskins. But when they had Alex Smith, man, I'm telling you, they're not bad. So does that give Washington a real chance to upset the Bucks and really unexpectedly, Chuck?
I mean, like I just told you guys, I would have put them on upset alert. I probably would have went out on a flyer and taken Washington. But what I saw out of Alex Smith last Sunday is very concerning. I think they rushed him back from injury, particularly because they were in a playoff chase, and because Dwayne Haskins, did what he did and then ended up getting cut, released, however you want to spell it out. So with Alex Smith not at 100%, I think they're going to have to rely more on, the duo of Antonio Gibson and J.D. McKissick. So, but I just think Tampa Bay will have too much in the end. I think their defense is pretty good. I like Todd Bowles. I didn't like him as a head coach, but I like him as a defensive coordinator. And I just can't see a less than 100% Alex Smith, just putting up points on that defense. To spell it out, basically, if Washington can keep it close the longer we get into the game, I think their chances of winning increase. But it all depends on how Alex Smith looks. Now he's two weeks back from the calf injury, so it's going to be very telling in that first couple of series how he looks.
James?
So I think the Bucks when I think they when you said the line like 8.5. I take the Bucks by 14. I think they win by touchdowns. I think they just have far too many weapons. That was always the plan with Brady and his friends all coming into play. He would just have so much to play with, so many weapons. And I think it's a long day for Alex Smith. By the way, I think it's amazing the job he's done coming back from being out of the game for 2 years with horrendous injuries. He's come back. It's sort of like a Cinderella story. But I think the end chapter is this weekend.
Well, a few things to that. I can't really bet against the Bucks, especially I'm picking them to go to the Super Bowl. The thing is, experience is going to play a part in this, sure. Alex Smith didn't look that great last week at all, and you could argue the reason why the Redskins, Washington is even in the playoffs is because Jalen Hurts was pulled in that fourth quarter, which is a totally different conversation. I believe the Bucks just have the most complete team in the NFC. Tom Brady's hot. He's not a guy to bet against in December or January. That's where he thrives, even though that may be why it looks like his worst month came in November. But December, he looked like he's turned back the clock. 4 touchdowns here, 5 touchdowns here, 400 yards there. It's tough for me to bet against him right now. Antonio Brown looks like he's coming back to life a little bit. Really happy to see that. Gronk turning back the clock. The Bucks have way too many weapons, and that's why they are probably the most dangerous team in the NFC right now. I got to be honest. Chuck, any last thoughts before we move topics?
I don't think I can really distinguish Tampa, to come out of the NFC. I think the Saints are better, and we saw that twice this year when they defeated them. I think Green Bay is better without a doubt. Against Seattle, it would have to be a tough call, but I would give the edge to Seattle because having Jamal Adams back and healthy, helps them in with the run game, and they look better off on defense with that. Jamal Adams can come on the blitz and get to the quarterback. So I think the top 3 seeds in the NFC are all better than Tampa Bay. So with that being said, I don't think Brady is going to see not a 7th Super Bowl, but was it like a 11 Super Bowl appearance, I think, which is crazy to say.
10.
So
It would be 10. Well, we got one more team we have to talk about, and that is one of those top 3 NFC teams, and that is the New Orleans Saints. I feel like Drew Brees was a guy that he should be in the GOAT debate or in that conversation or the Mount Rushmore of quarterbacks, given leads the league all time in yards. I believe he's among the top in touchdowns. He's always breaking. He had many years of 5,000 yards. Is this the last chance the New Orleans Saints have a chance to win a title in the Drew Brees era? We know what they did the past 3 years, and it was extremely disappointing. The Stephon Diggs miracle, the pass interference call, and getting outplayed at home by Kirk Cousins and getting outplayed by your teammate Taysom Hill. Is this the Saints' last hurrah to win a title under Drew Brees? Or has the championship days for Drew Brees already passed? Is that window closed?
I think it's closed. I think what we've seen from Drew Brees, even before he broke 1 billion ribs, was he was slowing down. We mentioned it on our podcast that Taysom Hill was coming in and taking snaps during games. And then Drew Brees would come back in after a couple of snaps. So he was already getting rested during games, having these like old man naps. And I think what's going to happen now is that this playoff run, I think, will get past the wild card, but he's not going to go any further than that. And that's only because they're playing the Bears. But I think for me, Taysom Hill, he came in, he did a job. They've got Alvin Kamara. I think they actually have a new kind of line of players ready to come in after Brees. I don't think Taysom Hill is the answer, but I think he's a good option to go to. And he certainly helped them out when Brees did go out injured. But for me, I think his days are past. And as great as he is, he's probably a first ballot Hall of Famer without a doubt. But I sadly, because I quite like Drew Brees, I sadly think his days of winning Super Bowls are past.
Those days are certainly over. I'm always a believer when you have that heartbreaking loss or something just doesn't go your way, it's really, really hard to bounce back. And the Saints had pretty much, you had 2 of those. The Stephon Diggs miracle, that's going to be a really tough thing to ever bounce back at. When you have a loss like that, a heartbreaking loss like that, it's hard to recover. I look at it as a similar situation as the Atlanta Falcons. Up 28-3 in the Super Bowl, we know what happens. The rest, Julio Jones makes that phenomenal catch, one of the best catches I've ever seen in my life. Matt Ryan takes about a 15 to 20-yard sack. The rest is history. Then the Saints, 2 years ago against the Rams, the blown pass interference call. Again, another thing to bounce back at. And then last year, losing in overtime to the Vikings, getting outplayed by Kirk Cousins, who's had nothing but playoff failures. So why am I supposed to believe, and this is all a year when you have Michael Thomas, who's been the best receiver in the league, who's not that anymore, dealing with injuries all year. Yeah, you still got Alvin Kamara. And those years they had probably, if not a top 3 defense, if I remember correctly. So with that being said, this year it is not their year. The era of Drew Brees is slowly but surely ending. I believe it's time for the Saints to move on from Drew Brees because I don't think they have championship aspirations anymore under him. I don't. Sure, he gets his numbers. This year, I think he took a huge hit in terms of his production. He's dealing with injuries, broken ribs. I don't know how that's going to serve him. Do I think that the Bears with Mitch Trubisky under center is going to upset them? Absolutely not. But their ceiling, I believe, is the second round of the playoffs, to be completely honest.
Well, on the contrary, I do think this is the end for Brees. I think this is his final hurrah. I wouldn't count the Bears just yet, and I'll get into that in a little while. But I think you guys hit it. I think this is the end for him. He's been through, the injuries. I think they're starting to pile up. You're starting to see it in his play. The arm is not what it used to be. Although he did look surgical last week against who did they play? They didn't play 10. They played Carolina. Yeah, Carolina. And he looked really good. And don't forget, he's also been without his top wideout for most of the year in Michael Thomas. So getting him back will be key. Getting Kamara back from the COVID issues will be key. but I do think this is the last chance. Will I take the Saints over every other team in the NFC against the Packers? Abso-freaking-lutely. But I do think that if they do get to the NFC Championship game in Lambeau, I just don't see how Brees can go up there in the cold weather, suffering from all these broken ribs and the punctured lung and the whole 9 yards. I just don't see him pulling it out. Now, the reason why I wouldn't count out the Bears just yet is the Bears are in the same boat as the Browns. They're playing with house money. And Mitchell Trubisky is playing for his future. He wants a starting job. He wants to be, the guy in Chicago. This is who they traded up for. He's looked really good of late. I think they said today that the Bears are, they have a winning record with Trubisky under center. And I think he really helps them with their O-line weakness. They got Allen Robinson on the outside. David Montgomery has had a couple of 100-yard rushing games. Do I think they can, beat the Saints? I don't think so personally, but I think they could put up a fight. And if their defense gets back on track, they got a couple of nice corners. They got Khalil Mack. If Khalil Mack can get into that backfield and, sack Brees a couple of times and get off his game, that's going to be key because once Brees settles in, it's good night pretty much. So I do think this is the end of Brees. And the reports are already coming out that he signed, TV contracts with, I think, ESPN or maybe it was NBC. So I do think that we're seeing the final game or games of Drew Brees.
I think that's totally fair. We all tend to agree that the Saints' championship window is pretty much closed. The Saints are ready to move on from Drew Brees. With that being said, I want to have one more topic in terms of football to wrap up today's show. If we really look at it, what is the best interest for the Saints moving forward in terms of the quarterback position? I got an interesting take on it of a guy I believe they should target. I don't believe Taysom Hill is the answer. I believe they're going to try it out with Taysom Hill because that's what the fans are going to want. That's what Sean Payton's going to want. He's going to be very high on him. I think he's trying to create that narrative. I think once they find out he's not that guy, it's really going to kill them. There is a guy that I'm going to talk about that they should target, but I want to hear what you guys have to say first. James?
So I believe that there's a quarterback that wants a trade in Deshaun Watson. I believe that could be a really good fit. Now, doesn't maybe fit the way Sean Payton is coached for so many years, because he's then going to have a very, very mobile quarterback who can run the ball. But, a change is as good as a holiday. So I think that move, I don't know who they have to give up. I don't know how much they have to give up to get Watson. I mean, the Houston Texans already gave up Hopkins last season, which was an absolute travesty. Would they, or are they stupid enough to give up Deshaun Watson as well? Probably not. I don't think they're that stupid unless they're getting someone or a lot back for him.
Chuck?
I think Taysom Hill is the future in New Orleans, and it pains me to say that because the guy is not good, and I don't understand the obsession Sean Payton has for this guy. I don't understand why I got to watch a Saints game and see Brees come out to the sideline just to make this guy Hill run these gadget plays that don't work 9 out of 10 times. When you watch the Christmas Day game, Alvin Kamara had 5 touchdowns. The ball's at the 1 or 2 yard line. Why are you taking him out to watch Taysom Hill run and get a touchdown? Why does Taysom Hill need to continue getting all these touches? And I think the Saints are completely sold on this guy for whatever reason, and I don't see I don't see them going outside of the organization to bring in a new starter next year. And I think Taysom Hill is their guy going forward. They gave him, a weird contract, 2 years ago that paid him more than he should be making. So I think they're gearing up for Taysom Hill to be the future.
Well, here's the thing with that. I have one guy in mind I believe the Saints should target. This may surprise a lot of people. Sam Darnold. Here's the thing. Sam Darnold is a very good quarterback. I believe he's very talented. I just believe the worst franchise in the league, with the worst coach in the league, absolutely destroyed that kid. He was a guy in college with a very high ceiling. Could say he had a low floor. He was a high turnover guy, had a lot of fumbles. He's still making the same mistakes he did in college. Let's not forget, he's only 23 years old. The Jets and Sam Darnold need to part ways because it's simply just not working. I don't think it's ever going to work. There's no talent around him, an awful front office, an awful coaching staff. But imagine putting him with that New Orleans Saints offense, with Alvin Kamara in the backfield. Get a guy like Michael Thomas healthy, a coach like Sean Payton to develop him. If that's the case, the Saints would be right back on top of where they've been. They won't have to deal with a rebuild or anything like that. I believe it will be in the hands of Sean Payton to develop him, fix the mistakes he did in college. With that being said, I like Sam Darnold to the Saints a lot this year because I feel like it's safe to say the Jets will and should move on from Darnold. But if the Jets make him available, if I'm one team that I would be all in for, if I'm the Saints, I would be going all in for Darnold. What are your thoughts on that, guys?
So I think that if the Jets hadn't been stupid enough to win games and had the number one pick, I think Darnold would be on the block and the Jets would have Trevor Lawrence. But because they don't have that number one pick anymore and they're not getting Trevor Lawrence, he's off to Jacksonville, I don't think they can put Sam Darnold up there because they know the Jets aren't. Well, the Jets were stupid. They kept Adam Gase around way longer than they needed to. But I don't think they're stupid enough to make a mistake like getting rid of Sam Darnold or trading Sam Darnold or whatever they do. I think Sam Darnold is going to be at the Jets for a while longer.
I don't see the Saints trading for Darnold, and besides what I just said earlier about Taysom Hill being their future, I think that the money's not going to work. I think the Saints are almost over the cap, or they're in like a really tough cap situation next year, and they're not going to give Darnold, $25 million a year that he's probably going to get. So, with that being said, I just don't see them giving up the compensation to get Darnold, and then having to give him the 50-year option because he was a top 5 pick and whatnot. So I do think Taysom Hill is the future. I do see Darnold being traded for the reasons I just said. I think the Jets are going to want to restart the quarterback clock contract-wise. So I think Darnold's going to go to a team that is ready to win now. It's probably not going to be Pittsburgh either because they're in a bad contract with Roethlisberger. So I do think Sam's going to get traded. Probably the 49ers, I would have to guess. But I do think Taysom Hill is the future in New Orleans.
I think here's my prediction. The Saints will go all in for Darnold. If they do trade for him, if the Jets are ready to move on from him, it will be a battle for the starting job between Taysom Hill and Sam Darnold. Who's going to win that? I don't know. I feel like Taysom Hill will have the advantage in terms of Sean Payton's decision because he likes him so much. I believe he's a fan favorite there. They love how tough he is running the ball. The guy's like a receiver, running back, tight end, and quarterback all in one guy. So in terms of the fans, in terms of Payton, he's liked more. But I feel like that offense will be really good with a guy like Sam Darnold. Again, he's a guy who's shown flashes of a lot of talent, extending plays that we're not really used to seeing. But with a team that's just so bad, the offensive line for the Jets has been disgusting. The receivers haven't been healthy, and even when they're healthy, they're terrible. Their running game has went to the toilet bowl. Le'Veon Bell has done nothing with the worst coach in the league. So with that being said, moving him in there, I think that is his best chance to really prove he was that guy coming out of college. Like when we thought at a UFC, like, okay, this is the next Joe Namath in terms of the Jets case, right? The Jets really found their franchise guy. We know the Jets, they're typical of just ruining guys, this and that. But I feel like this is a time where they could really bounce back in terms of, or Sam Darnold could bounce back rather, and make his career like we projected to out of college. I feel like this would be his last hurrah. But I think the Steelers would be a good option. I think the Colts would be a good option. Darnold needs to be in a place where they are in a winning culture and a team that's ready to move on from an old quarterback. The Colts, the Steelers, and the Saints are 3 teams that I could see Sam Darnold going to this offseason. What are your thoughts on that to wrap up? And then I wanted to one baseball topic quick.
All right. I just can't see the Saints doing it. I just don't think a team like that is just going to give up, picks just to go get the quarterback when I think they have their solution already in-house. Now, I know we could sit here and argue back and forth all day. I just think Taysom Hill is Sean Payton's guy, and you see it every Sunday when he goes out on the field and get his, 10 little wildcat gadget plays that are so corny. So I just think that Taysom Hill will be the future. I think the Jets do move on from Sam. They probably trade him somewhere else. But I think the Saints are fine. Like James said, they got Alvin Kamara, they got Michael Thomas, they got their new, I guess, offense going forward. So I just don't see it.
James, final thoughts about about this upcoming weekend?
Yeah, so I think for me, I think Sam Darnold does leave potentially, but again, unless they draft another quarterback, I don't think it happens. If it does happen, I don't think he goes to New Orleans. I think Jimmy G is going to be heading to New England, and I think Sam Darnold would slot in really nicely in San Francisco.
That's interesting, but that's going to wrap up football. But one topic real quick before we go. James, I know you're not a big baseball guy, but Chuck, on the other hand, I know a big baseball guy. The New York Mets, the team in the basement in New York, acquiring Francisco Lindor. What does this mean for the Mets? Can we see them now competing in the NL, or is they're just a dysfunctional franchise? Or is Steve Cohen really this answer for the Mets that they've been looking for? Where, okay, now we got our ace in Jacob deGrom, stud in Pete Alonso, you got Jeff McNeil in left field. Like, you got some pieces now. You can put Francisco Lindor probably in the leadoff spot. Now, what are we looking at in the New York Mets moving forward?
Go ahead, James. Go ahead.
So for me, sorry, the feed kind of cut out, so I only caught some of that. But if we're talking big signings and like lots of pieces moving around, I think sometimes that this can be risky. Because if you're getting one big star and you're losing a lot of pieces and you're losing your farm, sometimes I think it's sometimes too big of a risk. I mean, Mookie Betts went to the Dodgers. That worked out pretty well. But I think for me, it's hard to bet the house on one player coming in.
All right, I'm going to yell about the Yankees. This was a move the Yankees should have made. I'm sick and tired of hearing about the luxury tax and how they lost $20 million because of COVID. I do not care. You have a top 5 brand that is recognized around the world. And I'm not just talking about USA. I'm talking about around the whole world. You go to Japan, they know who the Yankees are. You go to Germany, they know who the Yankees are. Right? I'm sick of hearing of this how cheapness. This was a perfect move. You know why? Because you get Francisco Lindor, who is probably one of the top players in the game, especially at his position. He is a personality. That's what you bring into this clubhouse. That's what the Yankees need. I said it once the Yankees lost. Where is the energy on this team besides Brett Gardner? And once Didi Gregorius left, the energy just went away, right? So you bring in Lindor. You move Gleyber back to second. That makes you better off defensively. You let LeMahieu walk. And the money you were going to give to LeMahieu, 20 plus whatever million a year, he's probably going to end up getting with the Yankees. You could have given that easily to Lindor. And another aspect of the trade, and nobody's talking about, is Carlos Carrasco. Imagine the Yankees would have got Carrasco and slid him right behind Garrett Cole. The Yankees don't have a number 2 or a number 3 starter right now. This trade was perfect for them, and the Mets gave up absolutely nothing. They gave up Ahmed Rosario, who stinks. Jimenez is a solid player, and they gave up 2 prospects who were really good. But for the quality that the Mets got back in the trade, they gave up absolutely nothing. So I don't know why the Yankees didn't make this trade, and I do think this makes the Mets a hell of a lot better than what they were. Francisco Lindor lengthens out that lineup with McNeil, Conforto, Alonso. The Mets even kept Dom Smith, which is mind-blowing. And Lindor is so good defensively that makes their pitching staff better. Now you got Carrasco to slide in between DeGrom and Stroman and whoever else they're going to have in the rotation, probably Syndergaard later in the year. So I think the Mets probably need to get one more player, especially a center fielder. I don't know if it's necessarily Springer. They need to solve the issue in center field, but once they do that, I think the Mets could easily be one of the favorites in the National League behind probably the Dodgers, the Padres, and the Braves.
Well, here's the thing to that. Yeah, this is a great move for the Mets. It made the Mets back noticeable in the NL. This is a position they need. It's a lefty in the leadoff spot who's playoff experience, has proven to be clutch, phenomenal defensively in that shortstop spot. Their lineup looks really good right now. I got to give it to the Mets. Their lineup looks really good top to bottom. With that being said, I believe one of their biggest X factors is the health of Noah Syndergaard. If Noah Syndergaard doesn't come back at all next year, or he does, and he doesn't is the Noah Syndergaard that we thought he was, then I think the Mets competing in the NL, I think could really put that away. The Dodgers, who obviously have won the World Series, are way head and heels above the Mets. And I believe the Padres are as well, acquiring Blake Snell. So I believe those two teams should be the favorites. And with the Mets, not only do they have to worry about Noah Syndergaard, because I'm always a believer pitching and defense wins championships in baseball. So that's going to be a key factor. And the biggest one is that closer role. If you don't have a good closer, if Edwin Diaz is in that bullpen, you're not winning anything. Something amongst those lines, like something's going to go wrong. Edwin Diaz had one of the best years, at least of my time watching baseball, was last year with the Mariners, I believe 2018. He had about 57 or 58 saves, one of the most since K-Rod did it in like 2008 or whatever the hell the year that was. With that being said, the Mets need to figure out that closer role, because if you don't have a guy you could hand the ball to in the ninth inning, you're not doing anything in the postseason. That's something they really need to address. In that Robinson Cano trade, it looked like, okay, now we got a great closer in the back, because Jermis Familia wasn't that guy. We've known him to be extremely erratic in the ninth inning. Sometimes when he's got that slider on command, he looks like one of the best closers in the league, but he's a guy who's been super erratic. And Edwin Diaz, man, the slider's been flat. It's just been spinning, and his fastball's even flatter where he leaves in the middle of the plate. He could be erratic sometimes. So the reason I'm still not high in the Mets is that closer role. That is their Achilles heel right now, and of course the health of Noah Syndergaard. That's why I'm not crazy about the Mets in terms of the NL. But this is a great piece. Great move by Steve Cohen. Shout out to him. I mean, right when he comes in, he makes a huge splash in the offseason. It's a move the Mets need. It's a move their fan base deserves. But with that being said, there's still a few pieces they need to fill.
Yeah, and it's crazy.
Any last thoughts to wrap up before we close up?
Yeah, it's crazy when you bring up the Diaz and Cano trade. The Mets threw more for Diaz and Cano than they did for Lindor and Carrasco. Like, it's mind-boggling. And I don't know why teams are not taking advantage of teams trying to sell in this pandemic world that we're living in. Why are the Yankees not jumping all over guys like this? Why did they not go and get, a Blake Snell like you just mentioned? Why didn't they go get a Yu Darvish? So it's crazy how the baseball world is kind of, we're seeing moves just because of their pandemic. And I really wonder if now the Lindor domino falls, how other moves are going to now be affected. Does the hot stove, start to heat up and we start to see deals? It's going to be very interesting. James,
any last words before we wrap up today's show?
No, thank you so much for having me. It's been a lot of fun being here. It's my first time ever live on YouTube, so it's a bit scary. But, yeah, thank you for making it easy for me.
Hey, well, I want to thank both of you guys for joining me today. Always fun talking sports on any platform. But if you haven't already, make sure you follow me on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube if you want to check out any more of my content at The Falco Takeaway on all major social media platforms. But again, Chuck, James, thanks for joining me. Really appreciate it.
Thanks.
No problem. Thank you.
It's the Worldwide Sports Radio Network.